Could eastern Ukraine follow the same pattern as Crimea? This Tuesday, authorities struggling to regain control of government buildings in the cities of Luhansk, Kharkiv, and Donetsk. Donetsk, the political base of ousted President Viktor Yanukovych. Is Moscow making a move or simply piling on the pressure as it consolidates gains? Pressure in the pipeline as well, with the head of Gazprom announcing a 44% price hike for Ukraine. Ukraine, which already owes the Russian energy giant 1.7 billion euros. With Kiev's coffers empty, is it now up to Europe and the US to pick up the tab? Could Russia really shut the tap like it did for 2 weeks back in early 2009? It's got all energy policymakers scrambling for solutions on this continent, both short-term and long. And if that means alternatives to the natural gas that runs through Ukraine, then who gets the last laugh? Russia or the West? And what becomes of the Ukrainians, of course? Today in the France 24 debate, after Crimea, is it on to eastern Ukraine? With us to talk about it from Donetsk, France 24 correspondent Gulliver CRAGG. He'll be joining us shortly. Joining us here in the studio, Igor RESHETNIAK of the Euro-Maidan collective, which since November has been camped out in the streets of the capital and in other cities of Ukraine. Also joining us, Anton, who teaches at the American Graduate School of International Diplomacy. Thank you for being back with us. He advised the Ukrainian government from 1994 to 97. Boris NAJMAN teaches economics at the University Paris-Est Créteil in eastern Paris. And Marcin ZABOROWSKI, director of the Polish Institute of International Affairs in town. Thanks for being with us. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter. Our hashtag F24debate. Kharkiv, Luhansk, Donetsk, the sudden occupation of government buildings on Sunday, stoking tensions in the Russophone east of Ukraine. Overnight, police moved to dislodge protesters in Kharkiv. There were some 70 arrests reported from that. There you see the map with those cities. Just before we went on air, Marcin, you were telling us you were in Kharkiv a few weeks ago.
Yes, indeed, yes.
Who do you think is behind all the occupation of these administrative buildings?
Well, demonstrations in Kharkiv, pro-Russian demonstrations, have been going for some time, and I think it's quite clear that they have been instigated from outside.
What makes you say that?
Because of the evidence I saw with my own eyes, meaning that there were really a rather small number of people who were prepared to go out on the street and manifest, and they all carried all these banners, slogans saying referendum and saying federation. And when they were being asked, we were with some Ukrainian friends, we asked them, well, what is it? What do they want referendum for? The answers were very conflicted. Also, the accents of the people we were speaking with, some of them were purely Russian, some of them were not. And it was clear that these banners they had with them were prepared elsewhere.
And for you, it's clear that this was simultaneously, this was staged, the fact that on Sunday there was the occupation of these buildings in 3 cities all at once.
Well, there is obviously an element of a pro-Russian support within the cities, and quite large one, between 20 to 30%, which is nowhere near as big as in Crimea itself. So there is indigenous element there to support this kind of agenda, with certain worries which have been fueled by, I think, mistaken decisions of the Kiev governments, for example, with respect to the language law. Or also have been fueled by a certain propaganda which goes through the TV channels from Russia, which portray Maidan and all the changes in Kiev as the work of the Western activists and fascists, if you like. Yeah. So the narrative of these people in East Ukraine is very different to those in West Ukraine, if you like.
Anton KOSLOV, why now? Why are things coming to a head suddenly in eastern Ukraine at this particular moment?
Well, I don't think they're coming suddenly. I think it's been going on for quite a while. I think it is very important to keep in mind that the root of all this is the situation in Kiev, February 21 and 22, when in fact those agreements that was signed, the agreement signed by Yanukovych and the opposition didn't work. Yanukovych had to flee. So some people in Kharkiv and Luhansk, and those are in fact Russian-speaking provinces of Ukraine. I know people from Luhansk, for example, they all speak Russian. They hardly speak any Ukrainian. I'm sure the Ukrainian speakers there, but you have to keep in mind that the Ukrainian identity is fairly weak there in terms of sort of the Ukrainian identity, the way it is perceived in the Western Ukraine. So it's been going on for that, and now Russia is certainly trying to play its own game there. They are clearly, well, I don't know if you can say instigating, but certainly pulling the strings there.
All right, that's certainly what the U.S. Secretary of State has been saying. A short while ago, John Kerry testified before Congress. Let's hear what he had to say.
It is clear that Russian special forces and agents have been the catalyst behind the chaos of the last 24 hours. And equally as clear must be the reality that the United States and our allies will not hesitate to use 21st century tools to hold Russia accountable for 19th century behavior. It doesn't have to be this way, but it will be this way if Russia continues down this provocative path.
Let me get your thoughts on this. Igor, your thoughts on what the U.S. Secretary of State said, and also on what Anton said about there's less of an allegiance to Kiev in eastern Ukraine than there is in...
I think there is still an allegiance to Ukraine, maybe not in the sense of the central government, but they are very pro their own region. So it would be hard to imagine people of Donetsk not liking Donetsk. So they really like their region, and they are fond of this Donbass area. And actually, I think they still want to be in Ukraine because not so many of them really want to be with Russia. They want their rights to be respected, that is true, and they have been manifesting for a very long time. I think what is strange and what changed recently is that these manifestations became aggressive. So it's true that there were people coming out in the streets for a long time now, but suddenly there is this organized things going on in several places in Ukraine, and suddenly they become aggressive. And so for me, that was quite surprising in the sense that, okay, we did expect that Putin would act, and we were waiting that he would try to do something, but it didn't seem natural the way it happened. And it seems that also there might be an implication of the local, let's say, oligarchs like Akhmetov, because they are also trying to pull the strings, and now that he's...
Well, Akhmetov has been described in this case as attempting a mediation between...
Yes, he's attempting a mediation, but I think he might have he might have participated in the escalation somehow, inciting people to go there, because now he's the mediator, and he also can probably negotiate some things for himself, because now it's clear that he was supporting the previous regime, and the new government in Ukraine isn't friends with Akhmetov.
All right, we're going to talk about that. We're going to pick up on that point with our correspondent. Our correspondent who reported to us earlier that it's not just the cities, it's also on the borders. Gulliver CRAGG filed this report.
Tank maintenance for this Ukrainian army unit close to the Russian border. The soldiers asked us not to say exactly where they were or to show any wide shots, but they were in good spirits.
The main thing is our morale is high, because without that, you don't get anywhere. In terms of our equipment, well, you can see.
Local residents, though, are not so impressed.
Russia has the strongest army in the world, even stronger than NATO. What's Ukraine compared to that? Our army hasn't got the equipment, hasn't got the new technologies.
The villagers aren't expecting an invasion.
In Crimea, the Russians were protecting local people against the fascists. That's why they sent the army. Putin didn't just decide he wanted to take it over. They asked him to. Here it's different. Here all is peaceful and quiet.
Virtually everyone living in these borderlands has family on the other side.
You're asking me to imagine there's a war and I'm going to shoot. My brother or someone is going to come up there and I'm going to shoot him. That's not going to happen.
Up there, barely 3 kilometers, is the border. Ukraine's authorities have made much of their strengthened border defences, but evidently those are only at certain locations.
And we can join Gulliver CRAGG, who sent that report. He is now in Donetsk. Gulliver, interesting because we see there that the locals, at the same time, very much a Russophone identity, but a bit ambiguous when it comes to how they feel about Moscow.
Well, they feel very friendly towards Russia. You know, the Russians are their neighbors, really. The local people, though, in all the villages in the countryside, it was around near Kharkiv, they all say the same thing. They don't want war, and they don't believe that war is going to happen. They find it almost inconceivable that these people who are their neighbors and in most cases their family are now supposed to be considered their enemies. Actually, quite a lot of people said to us that they were fans of Vladimir Putin. Interestingly, though, people who were praising Vladimir Putin didn't really want to have that caught on camera.
And tell us about the situation right now. We know that in Kharkiv there was this intervention. There are people under arrest. What's the situation right now in Donetsk and Luhansk?
I believe in Luhansk there's a very...
Oh, we seem to have issues with the liaison with Gulliver CRAGG. We'll try to restore that as soon as possible. Let me get your reaction. We're told that Gulliver is back. Gulliver, can you hear us?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Yeah, you were telling us about the situation right now in those two cities.
Well, in Luhansk, I believe that the security services building is occupied by pro-Russian or separatist demonstrators, and that they're holding people hostage in there. I've just read about that, though I'm not in Luhansk. In Donetsk, I spent much of the afternoon inside the occupied regional administration building. The whole building is occupied by the separatists, and there's a real variety of people there. Quite a lot of people are drunk, quite a lot of people are quite violent, but a lot of people are also really quite similar to the people I was talking to in Kiev on Maidan for those 4 months of protests against Viktor Yanukovych's regime. People who tell you that they're sick of corruption and that they want democracy, and somehow they seem to associate getting rid of corruption and democracy with closer ties to Russia, or possibly even joining the Russian Federation. That seems to our Western ears somewhat illogical, but some of the people I spoke to, I really had the impression that they were sincere, despite what the government in Kiev might be telling us, which is that they're all paid for and that this is a Russian special forces operation. I mean, what I think has happened is that the Russians and the people who have been sort of sent to engineer this have succeeded in any case in getting quite a lot of people in these regions on side. And you can see good reasons why that might be the case, because the government from Kiev, I mean, they haven't sent a single major leader to this region since the ouster of Viktor Yanukovych. It's been more than a month now. It took the Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk 3 weeks before he even made a single speech in Russian to try to, speak to the people in these regions. People here are very worried about the economic impact of IMF-prescribed shock therapy medicine, if you like, and all those fears are being amplified, of course, by the Russian media, who are, on top of this, constantly telling people here that the people in power in Kiev now are basically fascists.
All right, Boris NAJMAN, you heard Gulliver CRAGG. No, he hasn't spotted any special agents, but he's spotted a lot of fed-up Ukrainians.
I mean, we have to look at the situation globally. I mean, first of all, the price, as you said, of gas raised by more than 80%, actually, almost $500, the 1,000 meters square cubic. But also the fact that all the exports are blocked from Ukraine to Russia. So the situation is particularly difficult for this region, economically speaking, because a lot of people are working, exporting goods to Russia. So it's really, the situation is difficult for the population. And after 2 years of Yanukovych government, there is no more money in the government. There is no more money in the budget because everything was stolen or misused. So it is really a difficult situation for the population. This is why there is this
But there's
movement.
been several big political missteps. There was first this issue of rolling back Russian language, which was quickly dropped, but that created a fury. And what Gulliver just said, the fact that leaders haven't been to the area to speak to people.
Yeah, I think that the major problem of the Ukrainian political system is that for years, established by the Party of Regions, there was no contact with the population, neither in the West, neither in the East. All this was organized by a few oligarchs controlling the votes. And if you look at the Rada and the way how it's structured, it's mainly millionaires that are there. It's not people elected, it's just people, they have the money to get the votes. And in Eastern region, it was like that. So people are fed up of this system. I think this is the situation.
How does this bode for Ukraine's democracy going forth, Marcin?
Well, we have elections coming up in May. And we have some interesting candidates, actually, a lot of them.
Including a billionaire.
Including
the chocolate king, Petro Poroshenko.
Indeed. Who incidentally is, if I'm not mistaken, he's first of all a Russian speaker, right?
Yeah.
And he is from central Ukraine. He was a minister in Yanukovych government. And he was a member of Party of the Regions, or at least he was affiliated with the Party of the Regions. So if Poroshenko, who was pro-Western during the Maidan protest and who supported Maidan also financially, if he becomes the president, then he could be this reconciliation figure, if you like, because he understands both parts. But I mean, as for the broader question about the future of Ukrainian democracy, first of all, we've got to ensure that this is free and fair elections, and that would require quite a lot of support from the West in terms of providing electoral observers. We have to flood the country with observers from here. And we've got to make sure that this process is transparent and clear. This is only the first step, because we also, this only is about the election of president, but we really have to have a new parliament. And these elections are not scheduled yet. So this is very important that will become the case.
All right, we have to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll ask our panel, can you be thinking about elections when those government buildings right now are occupied in eastern Ukraine? Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.